Well, I finally saw it. I finally had a chance to watch Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I know I'm overdue for this review. I apologize. It just took me a while to get to it. And all I wanted from this movie is to be able to say that it's better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That's all I wanted. That cannot be too much to ask, right? Just be better than Crystal Skull. And unfortunately, it's not. I hate to say it, but it's really not a good Indiana Jones movie, and it's not a good movie in general. I wanted it to be so badly, but it's just not. And early on, before the movie had even come out, I watched a couple of non-spoiler reviews for the movie. They were from big-name YouTubers. I'm not going to name anybody, but in terms of talking about reviewing movies, you can't get much bigger than these guys on YouTube. One was fairly positive. The other was extremely negative. One of them said none of the early plot leaks were true. The other said all of the early plot leaks were true. So immediately I was pretty intrigued because it was like, which one of these fuckers is lying? Well, it turns out they were both kind of lying. It's kind of funny. Some of the leaks were true. I would say most of them were. About 75% of them were probably true. And the 25% that wasn't true might have actually been true at one point. Who knows? Because it seems like they clearly changed a lot of stuff around. I think the ending of this movie just came from not having any idea what else to do. I think maybe their original idea was just so terrible and poorly received that they quickly pivoted to a much more cookie-cutter, safe ending, which, believe me, is still horrible. The worst thing about this movie is the ending. And just knowing that maybe it was actually worse at one point is even more shocking. But I'll talk more about that in a little bit. I'm going to try to avoid spoilers. There'll be spoilers, but I guess they'll be kind of vague, and I won't go into too much detail until I do. And when I do, I'll warn you. But for now, there's not really going to be any spoilers. But I'll let you know when there are spoilers. Kind of like how I did for the Flash video. But for now, I just want to talk a little bit about the first major flaw that I noticed in this movie. And it's, of course, the de-aging sequences. On paper, they're fine. The opening action sequence, which shows Indy back in 1944, about 6 years after the events of Last Crusade, was actually pretty decent in terms of the events that happened. If it was filmed in the 90s, it would have been a perfectly fine Indiana Jones moment. But because of the de-aging, it ruins it. I mean, it just looks so terrible in my opinion. The trailers hide it pretty well. But when you see the whole sequence, it looks more like a video game. A video game I'd like to fucking play, by the way. If you want to keep Indiana Jones going, if you want to keep the franchise alive forever, make some video games. Because they would look outstanding. You could tell a perfectly entertaining story in a video game form, and it would be awesome. If they can make a great Tomb Raider game, they can obviously make a great Indiana Jones game. They've made tons of great Tomb Raider games. Uncharted, that's basically an Indiana Jones ripoff. So it's not like it can't be done. I know that there haven't been that many great Indiana Jones games historically, but there's no reason that can't change. But in a movie, video game graphics simply don't cut it. It looks terrible. If he's totally still and not moving at all, it looks kind of okay. But it's an action sequence. He's moving around a lot. And it just looks so bad. It also sounds bad. It's Harrison Ford's current voice, which has obviously changed a lot over the years. Just doesn't really work on any level. And I really wish they would just stop doing the de-aging thing. I mean, it's like in every movie now. And it doesn't work. It does not work. Every time I've seen a de-aged person in a movie, it is jarring. It takes me out of it. It doesn't work. Please stop doing it. How many times do they have to fail with this shit before they realize that it doesn't work. The technology isn't there. I assume it's very expensive to do. They're spending a lot of money to do it. And it looks like shit. So please just stop doing it. Oh man, it's so bad. Where are we now? Oh, and we see Indiana Jones in the present day. Well, it's not really the present day. It's the present day of this movie. It's July of 1969. The moon landing just happened, or is supposed to happen that day. I'm not entirely sure. And Indy is a broken down shell of a man. His wife, Marion, has left him. They're in the middle of a messy, bitter divorce, and things are pretty terrible. He's retiring from his teaching job, which is also not going well. His entire class is asleep. They're not doing their assignments. Nobody seems to care about Professor Henry Jones Jr. anymore. And he also seems to really not like the idea of the moon landing. I think the movie tries to make it a symbol that Indy's time is over. The future is now, old man. And as soon as he meets up with his goddaughter, Helena Shaw, who he hasn't seen in years, she's the daughter of an old archaeologist buddy named Basil Shaw, who appears in the opening sequence. And from what I've heard, she is considered to be the worst thing about this movie. And while, I don't necessarily agree with that, I can definitely understand what they're saying. There are times in this movie, a lot of times, where she is absolutely insufferable. I don't know what they were trying to do with this character. She is introduced as a person who is only in it for money. She is just trying to get rich, and she doesn't really care who she hurts along the way. She actively endangers Indy's life several times early on. Her love of a fucking dollar is extraordinary. She manipulates Indy so she can get her hands on one half of the Archimedes dial, the Dial of Destiny, which Indy obtained in the opening sequence of the movie. And both he and Helena think it's just kind of an old trinket, despite the fact that her father, Basil, thought it was capable of time travel, which of course it is in this movie. And once Helena has it, she very quickly tries to sell it to the main villain, Voller, who's a Nazi that obviously wants to use the dial to change history. I'm sure you can guess what I mean by that. And she's just willing to give it to him for money. She even praises him at one point in the movie. So this Helena character was dead on arrival. She shows up, manipulates Indy, seems to actively try to get him killed, and she's helping Nazis. All because she wants money to pay off her gambling debts and various bounties on her head. I'm not joking. That's who she is. And then it dawned on me. This is not an Indiana Jones character. This is a Star Wars character. Helena Shaw is a female version of Han Solo. This movie shows you what it would be like if Indiana Jones's goddaughter was Han Solo. It's madness. She even has the same character arc as Han Solo. She's in it for the money at first, and then she eventually develops a conscience, and then saves the day at the end. She's Han Solo. Although, not a good Han Solo. It takes Harrison Ford charm and charisma to make Han Solo likable, in spite of his seemingly unlikable qualities. And unfortunately, she doesn't have those. And I'm not trying to attack the actress. I think she does a fine job with what she's given, but she's just not written to be likable. And unfortunately, Helena and her sidekick Kid are the real heroes of this movie. Her kid's sidekick has almost the same backstory as Short Round, by the way, which is fucking incredible. Also, John Rhys Davies shows up as Sala in this movie, and he's completely wasted. So is Antonio Banderas. You might not even know he's in this movie, but he is. To the point where I was wondering why he's even here. I don't know why he's in the movie. I mean, they obviously paid him a lot of money for this minute role, when they probably should have just paid a lesser known actor a normal amount of money, might have cut down on the ridiculously overinflated budget for this movie, which is now coming back to haunt them. And Mads Mikkelsen plays Voller, the main villain. He's okay, I guess. He seems like kind of a waste. The actor is like born to play a legendary villain, but Disney keeps missing the mark with him. He's been in Star Wars, Marvel, and now Indiana Jones, and it just feels like they don't really know what to do with him, which is a shame because he's a really good actor. And now I feel like I got to talk more about detailed spoilers here. I just have to discuss the ending of this movie because it's genuinely atrocious. And I'll put a little text in the video to show where you can skip to in order to avoid the spoilers. Okay, so here we go. I thought this was shaping up to be better than Crystal Skull, at least until there was about 20 minutes left in the movie. The ending is what really ruined it for me. Voller and his crew of Nazis have completed the Archimedes dial, and they take Indy captive on board a plane. They plan to use it to go back in time to 1939 and win the war for the Nazis. But Voller miscalculates, and they end up at the Siege of Syracuse in like 212 BC. This is where Archimedes lived and developed the dial. Voller is devastated by his failure, and he dies a very anticlimactic death. Indy and Helena parachute to safety, and Indy inexplicably plans to stay behind. He wants to stay in ancient Sicily, which will shortly be controlled by the fucking Roman Empire. He tells Helena to use the dial to get back home, but he's staying. Oh, and he also has been shot in what looks like the fucking chest. He simply will not survive if he stays behind. He's an 80-year-old man with a gunshot wound in his chest in ancient Rome. Best case scenario, he gets captured and they put fucking leeches on his balls until he dies an agonizing death. Worst case scenario, they capture him and torture him as some kind of wicked future demon sent here by Jupiter to destroy them. I mean, it's asinine that Indy says he wants to do this. So Helena simply knocks him out with one punch. I mean, a big fucking Nazi dude punched him in the face a few minutes prior to this, and it didn't knock him out. But one punch from this bitch, and he's KO'd? And I'm not complaining because he got knocked out by a woman. It's totally plausible. But when it's Indy, it doesn't seem right that that happens. Because he's never been really knocked out by anyone in one punch. When have we ever seen that? I can't think of one instance. I mean, Indiana Jones is known for getting beat, fighting back, taking hits, and almost enjoying it at times. It just makes him look so silly. And there was audible laughter in the theater when this happened. So it's not that she knocked him out that bothers me. It's the fact that he was knocked out at all that bothers me. It just makes him look really dumb. And it's the fact that it's like at the end of the movie, which is like, this is how the movie ends. Just so ridiculous. And he wakes up in his own time with Helena. Marion walks in, and they reconcile their differences in the cringiest way possible, and the movie ends. It's fucking stunning. Oh, and it's also revealed earlier that what happened to Mutt Williams, his son, he died in Vietnam. And that's what caused Indy and Marion to break up. It's a little dark for a fun adventure movie, wouldn't you say? It's pretty depressing. Honestly, I was so surprised by that ending. It just feels like they had no ideas. Like they didn't know what else to do. And it's a shame because there's a decent Indiana Jones movie somewhere in here. But it just didn't work when it's all said and done. And let's face it, time travel is kind of a silly premise for Indiana Jones. I'm not saying it can't work. But it's definitely more extreme than the stuff we've seen in previous movies. The Ark can melt your face. The Sankara stones, we don't really see what they can do because all 5 of them were never in the same place in the movie. And the Holy Grail gives you near immortality. Time travel is just way more extreme than those things, in my opinion. And Ultimately, I think they should have gone with some of the ideas for indie sequels that never happened. In the late 90s, I remember hearing about a possibility of an indie movie where they would have him go after King Arthur's sword, Excalibur, which I think would have been pretty cool. Or Indy Finds Atlantis. There was a pretty cool video game in the 90s called Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. I mean, that would have been a perfect idea for Indiana Jones, I think. But instead, they went with the Dial of Destiny, and it just doesn't really work. Overall, not a good indie movie at all. And for the Space Rock rating, I give it 2 Space Rocks out of 5. Pretty depressing to see that this is the end for this character. I mean, we don't need to see him as a broken down old man. We just don't. And I think ultimately the problem is Disney. They've done some good things with Marvel, but anytime they try to make a sequel in a franchise that was established long before they acquired the rights to it, it fails, in my opinion. Whether it's Star Wars or Indiana Jones, the result is always the same. Just disastrous, hollow, corporate bullshit with none of the heart or charm that made the original so iconic. And if I was going to rank the Indiana Jones movies, I'm sure you can guess how it is going to go, but I'll do it anyway, because why not? Number 5 would be this movie, Dial of Destiny. Somehow managed to not even top Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Number 4 would obviously be Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. You know how I feel about that movie. Number 3 is where it finally gets legitimately great, Temple of Doom, and it's only number 3 because the top 2 are basically perfect movies. And this is where it gets kind of tough for me because I love them both so much. But number 2 is probably Last Crusade. I know it's almost objectively a better and more character-driven story than Raiders, but I'm biased because Raiders is the first indie movie I saw when I was a kid, and it blew my mind. It's also the one that I rewatched the most. It's a 2-hour movie, but it feels about 75 minutes. It flies by. Contrary to Dial of Destiny, which is 2.5 hours long, and you feel every bit of that time when you're watching it. Somewhat ironically, you're going to be checking the time while watching this movie. It's just a mess, and maybe at some point I'll go a little deeper with it and do a full commentary video just to sort of round out the indie movies. But for now, I'm just happy to try to imagine that the original Indiana Jones trilogy are the only movies in the series that count, because that's how I feel about it. Those movies are timeless classics, and I think they serve as kind of a reminder for how weak the Hollywood blockbuster has gotten in recent years. I mean, most of it is very mediocre. And it would be nice if we could get back to the kind of movie making that made the 70s, 80s, and 90s so great. But I have my doubts that that's ever going to happen. Anyway, I've babbled long enough. Let me know what you thought of this movie. Are you with me or do you disagree? Let me know. And my next video should be a lot more fun and hopefully more entertaining than this. So stay tuned for that. But that's about all I got for now. So until next time, take it easy.